This episode of The Young Turks is brought to you by T-Mobile.
Little incident in Great Britain involving the Rupert Murdoch empire. We have a little bit of a story we're going to run for you now, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. Let's go to the clip.
Here in London, this is much more than the story of the demise of one paper. It is a huge political scandal. Some are saying could be as big as Watergate. It is also a scandal at Scotland Yard, which failed to investigate these illegalities, and it is raising questions about the future of the Murdoch media empire. If the news of the world really covered its own demise, today's headline might read, "Tawdry tabloid dies, no one cries." The paper's cause of death? Self-inflicted by its reporters, editors, and owner, media baron Rupert Murdoch.
The News of the World, as owned and managed by Rupert Murdoch, was a criminal organization.
For years, the News of the World delighted in enraging and embarrassing politicians, celebrities, and royals by exposing their most intimate failings. The public loved it. At its peak, the tabloid sold 8 million copies each Sunday, bringing in huge profits. For a decade, though, the paper has ducked a nagging scandal about its news-gathering methods. This week, that changed. All because of this girl. Her name, Millie Dowler. In 2002, Britain was riveted by the story of the 13-year-old's disappearance. Investigative reporter Nick Davies of the London Guardian broke the story.
We discovered that during the period of time when she was missing and there was no explanation for what had happened to her, the News of the World were using a private investigator to listen to her voicemail. Now, that in itself was horrid. But where it then got worse was that the voicemail box on Millie's phone filled up. The News of the World were hungry for more information, for more stories, so they intervened and deleted the messages.
That gave her family and police hope that she was alive. Millie was later found murdered. In a country used to sleazy tabloid techniques, this was a new low.
The Millie Dowler story changed the politics of the whole saga, and it made it really impossible for anybody to defend the News of the World.
Overnight, the most powerful man in British media became a villain. Murdoch.
Okay, so this is a really interesting story, and I think a really important one for our country, too. First off, let me start with a word of advice for Rupert Murdoch. It's now become clear that the corporation you run is, in effect, a vast criminal enterprise, and the worst case scenario is that you yourself could face prosecution as quickly as you can, become a bank. Because at least in this country, the way not to get prosecuted is to become a too-big-to-fail bank. But I was talking to some people who work in the British press over the weekend. Suspicion is that Rupert will slip away personally on this one, although you never know. But I suspect that's true. We'll get to that in a second. First of all, I studied in England for a year, although to say I studied would be overstating. I ostensibly studied in Great Britain for a year. It is still a sore point with my father that my activities did not incorporate enough of what might legitimately be described as study. But I was there. And to an American, it's mind-boggling how sleazy their press is. You can't imagine. I can't tell you if you haven't been there. But when that guy says, in a country known for whatever he said, cheap and tawdry journalism, he ain't kidding. And I mean, for a while, for example, these newspapers like the News of the World, Rupert's paper, or The Sun were trying to outdo each other in pictures of large-breasted topless women. And it was Bird of the Day, and it was Page 3 Girl, and just the sleaziest, trashiest, which Rupert brought. Nobody thought that anything could be trashier in New York than the Daily News. Rupert proved them wrong when he bought the Post. So they ain't kidding. But this is how stories turn. There had been reports for a long time that they were tapping a lot of people's phones, and it was kind of pretty much understood that they did, and including the royal family and, members of parliament and politicians and so on. But somehow nobody cared for some odd reason, the way these things work in a country. And so the story lingered and lingered, even started to get into police corruption, reports that Scotland Yard people there were being paid off to help them tap the phones or whatever. Still nothing. Then it went to this young girl who was murdered. And that was the tipping point, because as the report said, here you're talking about parents who spent months of agony not knowing where their girls were. And these people weren't just listening to her calls, they were deleting them so that they could get more calls and listen to them too. And the parents thought, she's alive. She's alive. She's listening to her messages and deleting them and sending out tearful, heartfelt messages to her. She was dead. And then the News of the World did that and convinced them that she might be alive. So that was the tipping point. And that's when people were willing to challenge Rupert Murdoch directly. Now it came out over the weekend that they were also tapping the phone of Prime Minister Gordon Brown. Again, nobody cares, seems to care. But after the 13-year-old girl, now they care.
T-Mobile's great selection of tablets, laptop sticks, and their new mobile hotspot allows you to stay connected to the internet on the go. Affordable high-speed internet when and where you want it, without the overages. Mobile broadband data plans start as low as $29.99 a month, and current T-Mobile voice customers save an additional 20%. Create your own personal hotspot on the go with T-Mobile 4G mobile hotspot. Get high-speed internet on up to 5 Wi-Fi devices, laptops, tablets, music players, gaming devices, and more. 4G capable with speeds up to 21 megabits. With the mobile hotspot from T-Mobile, you can share the power of America's largest 4G network. With devices like this, you can use T-Mobile's high-speed internet on the go.